Hello everyone, and welcome to A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. This is a summary of Book 1. Okay, so there are 6 chapters in Book 1. The first is all about setting. So, here we are in 1775, where the French government is too rich and the poor are dying. Now, England isn't doing so hot either, but focus on France for now. Bear in mind, this is before the French Revolution, so we're going to be seeing all the foreshadowing of the death and destruction scheduled for later on. Now chapter 2 starts out in England, on a creepy, foggy, foreboding road with a traveling mail coach. On it are the mail people, the coachman, and a few passengers. Soon, the coach stops because they hear a horse in the distance and are scared, remembering all the robberies that have been happening. Turns out, it's a messenger called Jerry. Remember him because he comes back later. Jerry talks to a Mr. Jarvis Lorry from Tellson's Bank, saying his message that states, "Wait at Dover for Mamselle." Lorry tells Jerry to take a new message back, and he recites the kinda creepy code saying, "Recalled to life." Now as we begin reading chapter 3, we start to follow Mr. Lorry's thoughts. As this occurs, we hear a lot of symbolism talking about being buried alive and digging up a grave. The first thing you need to know is he is not digging up a real grave. The second thing you'll want to remember is that Mr. Lorry is not actually talking to the person he is digging up. He's having a daydream or a conversation in his mind with the person. As we start chapter 3, following Mr. Lorry as he continues riding in the mail coach, we learn more about his message. He is going to recall someone back to life, or dig up a grave, so to speak. What we begin to understand is that Mr. Lorry is actually going to meet a man who has been wrongly imprisoned for 18 years. Now remember, this is France. Not only were the jails filthy, but no matter what your crime, you usually stayed in there until you died. So maybe the grave thing isn't all that far-fetched. Now as we continue, Mr. Lorry begins to daydream an imaginary conversation with the man he is about to dig up. In this conversation, Lorry asks the man if he even wants to be dug up. The man replies with, "I can't say." As we begin chapter 4, Mr. Lorry arrives at his destination, where he meets a young woman named Lucy Manette. Miss Manette is unsure of why she has been asked to come, not knowing that Mr. Lorry was the man who had taken her to live with her mother when her father had been imprisoned. She is also unaware of the fact that her father is still alive, because her mother, who had also passed, had always told her that he had died soon after she was born. Unfortunately for him, Mr. Lorry must tell the poor girl that not only is her father alive, but he is out of prison and she is about to go see him. Lorry begins by telling Lucy that this is all a matter of business. He then proceeds to talk about her mother and her father. Lucy, of course, is confused by why he speaks of such things. As Mr. Lorry continues, he unfolds the full story of how Lucy's father, known as Dr. Alexander Manette, is in fact alive, and is the man Lorry has come to dig up. Lucy is shocked and begins to cry. A red-headed woman, who is Lucy's caretaker, rushes in to help. Mr. Lorry is left alone while Lucy retires to think about the news, and thus concludes chapter 4. Now as we begin chapter 5, we leave Mr. Lorry for a moment and get a very intense description of a wine shop located in the poor suburbs of Paris. One thing to remember is that through this description there are 2 types of wine. There's the wine you drink, and then the symbolic wine. This is the wine that is used to mean blood. There is wine being sold in the shop, but symbolic wine being spilt in the streets. Of course, this all adds to the foreshadowing of the revolution that is to come. Now, as we continue with the story, we enter the wine shop and read about a conversation with a whole bunch of guys named Jacques. Don't be fooled. Jacques is actually a code name for fellow revolutionaries, all of whom report to a man named Mr. Defarge, the owner of the wine shop. Defarge and his wife are the people who get all the gossip about the royalty and make all the plans to dethrone them. You'll see more of them as time goes on. Also, she's in charge of knitting a record of everything that happens so that they don't get caught with it on paper, but they still have it. Now at this point in the story, we learn that Mr. Lorry and Lucy Manette are both at the wine shop because, as it turns out, Mr. Defarge is the one taking care of Lucy's father until Lorry comes. Together, the three of them climb up the stairs and see a man crouched over a shoemaking bench. Chapter 6. Despite Mr. Lorry's attempts to talk to the man, Dr. Manette doesn't respond. He seems dazed, transfixed by his work. But then Lucy tries, and the doctor seems to recognize her from somewhere. The doctor pulls out a lock of hair from his pocket and compares it to Lucy's, concluding that Lucy is his wife, Lucy's mother. Lucy tries to help him understand who she actually is, and he seems to follow her words, but is still very confused by them. He does, however, agree to go with Lucy, and Lucy, the doctor, and Mr. Lorry all leave the wine shop together, headed back to England. On the road, Mr. Lorry finds himself wondering once again if Dr. Manette will even be able to be recalled to life. In conclusion, Chapter 1 is about setting. Chapter 2 is about when Jerry delivers his message to Mr. Lorry. Chapter 3 is about when Mr. Lorry thinks about who he's going to be digging up. Chapter 4 is when Mr. Lorry tells Lucy about her father. Chapter 5 is when we read about the wine shop, the revolutionaries, and Mr. and Mrs. Defarge. Chapter 6 is when Mr. Lorry and Lucy talk to Dr. Manette and take him back to England. I hope this has been helpful, and good luck!